Hello there, and welcome to a new sort of project. This is something I'm calling 25 Day, and it's got a couple of rules that I want to relay to you. This is just normal challenge mode, but I've adjusted some things to make a more intrinsically interesting challenge. First rule is that I have to keep to the theme that I start with, but nature themes are okay with the specific biome that the map is in. In this particular instance, I'm using the Planet Coaster theme, and I'm also using the Temperate Forest Pack. Rule number 2, special effects, security cameras, and pool extras are exceptions to Rule 1, so I can use those if I weren't in the Planet Coaster theme. Rule number 3 is that I have to follow the challenges, so up here in the corner, you'll notice it says Employ Staff. I would need to follow this rule. And building rides, I would need to follow this rule as well. In addition to that, only one attraction can be added per day, as per the name of the 25-day challenge. This is basically leading into the goal of getting a 5-star park. And in order to reach a 5-star rating in a normal challenge park, you're required to have 25 attractions at the end of it all. And so by adding one ride per day, we're slowly inching our way forward to that point. Rule number 5, hard mode only. No deleting existing scenery or loans. So no way to cheese my way out of this one. All of the scenery that comes with the map, I'm leaving as it is, and I'm not taking out any loans whatsoever in order to get a bit of a head start. This means that I need to be more careful with my money. And thankfully, I understand how to make this work, but that doesn't make this any less of a challenge to a normal viewer of the game. And number 7, no pausing unless absolutely necessary, and no fast forward. So essentially this means that I have to mentally be here for the 2.5 hours it takes to finish a day. It can be quite taxing, as you can imagine. However, this is actually a really fun way to play. It means that I need to cobble together something very quickly and use some of my existing knowledge of the game to make certain things look good, while also being simple enough to duplicate to other portions of the park. What you're seeing here is day 1 of the Planet Coaster themed park. And so what did I accomplish in day 1? I have a basic entrance kind of sorted based on a lot of the things that I had already started with. I moved the entrances apart from each other and left open some windows for whenever I need to add in some shops or maybe an information kiosk later on that would sell priority passes and the like. Off to the side, I also made a little bit of a cute plaza for guests to sit down and enjoy their beverages, and eventually food when I would open this later. I also have some pieces set aside so that I could start in on this, but as per my rule to not delete scenery, I decided to keep this oak tree together, and I'll figure out how to make this building work later on. Full disclosure, if I want to, I can scale the thing up if I want to. I just really shouldn't move it very far from its initial starting location. That makes sense within the rules. I decided I also wanted to make something of a little river through here, and then have the path go over the river to reach the flat ride. This would add a little bit more dynamic range to the park, and even though it's still mostly flat, it gives you something more to look at. In addition to that, I decided on high roll because it generally makes quite a bit of money, and for the stats, 4.07 nausea is not necessarily that bad for how high of an excitement rating it has. You can see it's already quite popular. All of this is besides the point that I had a little bit of time to make myself a staff facility. I even had a little bit of time to work on trimming out the door frame, which looks pretty nice in my opinion. Off to the side, I also have a barrier blocking off staff entrance to coming up here and potentially servicing an air coolant duct, or maybe some other pieces of the roof that might need handling. This challenge is getting me to really focus on how I can turn these planters into something that's more dynamic. Because of the shape of this whole thing, I wanted to make sure that there was enough of a side room that makes sense for this staff room to be here. Could this comfortably fit 4 people in it? Absolutely. If it was just the single box and you would walk inside the 4x4 meter box, would that have been very comfortable? Would you have been able to fit much in it? Not really. So this makes it a little more believable. And for the time being, I copy-pasted that closer to the entry over here, so that these staff members and any others that would be roaming nearby the area wouldn't have to walk nearly as far. And that's day one. I didn't really accomplish much, but I extended the main path for expansion in the future, and also I created something of a little lake here as well, just for future ideas. Let's have a look at what day 2 was like. Another day gone, and there's more yet that has been done here. Very clearly tell I added in a mechanic workshop off to the side. Still haven't themed it yet, but I'll get around to it at some point. There are a few more pieces that have been placed around here. In all actuality, this building is probably going to have a flat roof at the end of the day. That's the only way you can get these curved pieces with the Planet Coaster pack to look the way they do. I wanted to go with a warm and inviting set of tones and pieces to make it lean into some of the nature elements a little bit more. The temperate pack is easily the most diverse pack possible, and it's that way because it's right in the middle of the temperature range for where these sorts of plants would normally come from. And so I have access to desert ironwood bushes at the same time as I have access to some of the pine trees that I might expect from a colder biome. As was shown in the last day, it was even cold enough to snow. So I have to keep these heaters around as well. Each of these heaters have a nice mint color to them, and I may change that depending on the area that it is in the future. I decided to decorate up this river a little bit after I had put the Mont Leon a little bit in the ground, and I'm actually very happy with this. This is not terrain, and I didn't yoink something off the workshop. I'm not using the workshop for this challenge. So this entire flat ride, the whole blueprint, is still under the ground. And you can see there's even some paths still around. I don't have a reduced footprint here. I just covered it with rocks and with a whole bunch of rhododendron bushes and some other foliage, and I think it turned out really nice. Especially the backside too. This exit gate leads out into an area where you can sit and watch the Mont Leon do its thing. Maybe watch your relatives go on the ride. And if you look just behind, you can also see Hyrule doing its thing as well. This is easily one of my favorite spots that I've added into the park so far, and it's just because it's the perfect spot for an awning to go, and maybe a couple picnic benches as well. With that in mind, I feel like this area has become pretty congested now too. So in the future, I'm planning to add in some expanded paths out this way, so that if this spot gets a little too crowded, guests can come over this way too. I have some room for more flat rides out this direction, and I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be expanded for. By the same token as me adding in a whole bunch of foliage and expanding across the little river that I have here, I also decided to add in some restroom blocks, and instead of just one, I added in 2. These don't cost anything to operate, beyond just cleaning them, so having more than one is actually not necessarily a bad idea, especially as the park scales up more with guest count. Using a whole bunch of trims and scaling them up has led to a very interesting bubbly look to this building, while at the same time having some concrete structures around the bottom to ground it in reality somewhat. I feel like this building needs a little bit more detail, but for the purposes of the challenge, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. That's day 2 in a nutshell. You can see I had a little bit more of an idea with what I was doing here, because I finally took all of the things in the bushes and plants portion of the temperate theming in the scenery menu, and I just popped them all down. As I add them, I'm going to move them into position, and then duplicate them over and over again until I feel like I've added a sufficient amount in the area, and then pull from the existing pool in the future, so that I have different varieties of plants going on throughout the park. Let's move on to day 3. I had someone asking in my chat, can you build a coaster? And I told them, according to the challenge, I would need to. And so here it is. This is the Floorless coaster, and it took almost all stream to make. It goes up to a height that would make it a hyper coaster, and I really love the idea of having it snake through these 2 paths. This is the first time I really experimented with using catwalks as a method of putting this lattice over the paths, because you see this kind of thing in real life where loose articles are prevented from falling out. So there's a bit of a mesh grate over the front of the coaster so that that doesn't happen. It's a really cheap and effective way to add a little bit of realism to the coaster, even if these steps aren't necessarily easily accessible. This is where you first start to see me using a bit of set dressing. I really don't like the look of power distributors. Not many people do. But if you have a sort of area that's designed for maintenance, then it can make sense to have it look like this. And because this is a park instead of a blueprint, which I'm still getting used to by the way, you can set aside these areas off to the side and give them a little bit of quote-unquote lore. You can see this is a well-treaded path that mechanics might come back to look inside the power distributor if they would want to, even though that has no in-game function. In addition to this, I added a couple of generators because I ran out of power at the entrance. These are still more effective to use than the entrance because if you were connecting power up here through the entrance gates, you're buying all of your power one-to-one. Instead of that, we can generate it ourselves for less of a cost. As long as our mechanics are on top of things, that capacity will make sense to have these down for. And as we continue on and get more money, we'll place down solar generators and advanced solar arrays, and that will help us generate even more power at a more efficient cost. My initial thought when building this coaster is I wanted it to travel around and explore parts of the park. So what this one in particular is doing, aside from some of the insane looking rolls and inversions, is going to that corner and back from it. So I decided to go with this insane looking dive roll over the top of the high roll ride, which is kind of fitting if you think about it. I realized in the future I need to support this really badly, but I just didn't have the time to get around to it yet. So that comes in the future for sure. Coming through this section, you can tell it has so much speed on it. And then it comes into this natural cave that Frontier is almost begging you to take a coaster through. And so I did. I dug it out too. There's not much happening back through here, but it's enough that the coaster feels like it is designed to have gone through this section. Next, I have it going around the bank of this natural pond before doing a couple of very basic maneuvers for a floorless coaster, except for maybe this element, which I'm not used to building a whole lot of. In fact, I rather dislike them, doing a 180 and then back the same direction that it went into that roll from. I feel like those are very jarring, generally speaking, and they don't feel the best to make, but in this particular instance, it made enough sense, and it kind of just happened without me thinking about it. Lots of little airtime pops going into this loop, which definitely needs more profiling. I used the silverette technique to build the loop how I wanted, and then extend out, pull the whole thing over so that the coaster would not be colliding with parts of its own track. And yet still it feels like it's not enough. So eventually, when I feel solvent enough, I want to come back and reprofile this whole thing. Even on day 5, this is still something that needs help, although it looks really cool from this perspective. And it's got that classic B&M teardrop, or VNN, as the game calls it. This section through here is rather smooth. I really enjoy it, especially this slow heartline roll over the existing track, which this train will now go through and experience. This section of track has still not been smoothed, but you can see starts of a station over here. I had lots of stuff planned for this thing, and I only just barely got it working right before the end of day 3. And so I had very little time to actually play around with some of the scenery besides. But what I did do is I added some planters in the middle, where I previously had this more separated. I just decided to make the whole thing look like a whole path, and I edited some of the paths so that guests can respect these areas a little more. And that was the end of day 3. But before we move on, I would love to show you what this ride looks like. So we're going to go on it at midday. that's kind of tricky about building coasters in specifically the rules that I've set is when I'm working on this, I can't speed up the game to test how the speed looks at a specific section. I sort of just have to wait until the coaster that's testing will eventually reach a certain area. And especially when I run out of money, I need to find things to do. So if ever I am below the threshold of money that I need in order to continue on with a coaster, that means I need to go find something else to do. And it usually involves terraforming or planning out the park with paths or other some such. It was really tricky on this day, and thankfully this is the worst it will ever get because we'll be solvent from this point forward. Speaking of, let's have a look at day 4. Ever more progress is being done. You can already tell we got this archway supported. And guess what? It looks great at night too. Got some really cool lights on it. These modern spotlights are really nice for backlighting certain elements like this. And while I have done some work to light everything up, it's taken a while for me to understand what exactly looks good in certain situations, especially since I only really have 4 hours in the day in order to make it look like everything is lit up. Since the day always resets at 8 a.m., I only have the remaining 4 hours in the day or so to deal with whatever else comes my way. And that is 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Not a whole lot to work with there. But it's enough to get some lights down and see how they look. Again, I don't have any time locking available to me while I'm in the challenge, so I kind of just have to play it by ear as I see them. At this point, I fully finished and furnished this building. I decided to use some of these brick wall ridge caps as a bit of divider across the whole thing, and then I hung the lights from the top, and it makes this thing super nice at night. Perfect lighting, if you ask me. I also had just enough time to work on some of these windows, which I decided to use some smaller pieces for, and I think look really good. You won't find something like this in the base game. This trim on the sides, it's all hiding where these brick pieces are coming from. If I delete them from a specific angle, you might find they stick out the other side. And so having the trim in place here is actually hiding an element that I don't want anyone else to see, while also not disrupting the grid or splitting it up into multiple different groups, which I kind of low-key hate. Also, having this open concept at the top gives it this very modern and sleek feel to it, especially with the steel roof over the top. Moving on from that, you can see the start of a gift shop appearing over here in the corner. I still have plans to fully enclose this building and make it look a little more full and alive, but for now, this is what I have. I still haven't added much more than another counter over here in the corner that you'll see on day 5. But what this is leading into from a broader perspective is actually the exit of this coaster, which is a long way, I know, but it's funneling guests straight into a gift shop, which is exactly what I would expect to see in real life. I'm trying to infuse some realism into my park this time around, especially with the Planet Coaster theme. I feel like it really lends itself to that sort of perspective on building parks out. I tried to make something of a switchback queue. It does work for what it's worth, but only if I delete this section, which I discovered during the next day was the only way for this queue to actually function. If you have entrance queue next to a line that already pre-exists, guests will be very confused when the ride is actually open. And so it won't actually work as intended, or at least they won't get in line and they won't jump on the ride. I like this awning that I have here. It's very simple, uses some of the base pieces, and honestly, it fits exactly for what I was looking for. Same goes for these lampposts too. You'll see this queue line that I just deleted will end up being fixed in day 5. And it's not a perfect solution, but I did find one. I wanted this switchback queue to stay intact, while at the same time being functional for the ride, because what good is a coaster if no one's going to ride the coaster? I'm glad that I finally troubleshot that and was able to figure out what the problem was. You can see starts of a station here, and you'll see more of it done pretty soon as well. At this point, I also moved most of the plants that I was working with over, and I started doing the same thing with trees. And it'll help keep the park look varied in a lot of its foliage. This creates a beautiful mosaic of different types of colors, especially with some of these red and yellow trees, and even some of the Japanese cherries. With that all out of the way, I'm really happy with how this child coaster turned out, and it's actually quite fast and fun. Feels more like a family coaster than it does a child coaster, if you know what I mean. Here's the perspective on this ride. And there you have it. Quite fast, whips through this forest pretty nicely. Again, using the terrain to its advantage. This initially was pretty slow through here, but after reducing the friction a bit, I feel like the coaster is at the perfect speed for it to be really exciting. This was another natural element that I used for the coaster. I think it turned out really nicely, going into the big scary cave. Although, it's not very big, nor is it scary. Maybe at some point I can change the scary part. And that's it for this update for day number 4. It branches off a little bit further, and I'm thinking this will be the coaster corner of the park, over in this area. I can maybe start up a station here and have it roll around here in the middle between the two existing coasters. But of course, there's more yet to go, and so let's have a look at what day 5 has in store for us. And this is the current and most updated version of the park that, as of recording this, I have finished today. We have some very exciting things to look at. This is the park in its current state. If we look around, you can see a couple more pieces of foliage have been added through here. In this little run before the loop, I decided to add in some of these Japanese maples. I don't like the LOD for them, but as long as you're either far away or up close, you're mostly fine. At this point, I added a second counter for the gift shop because I noticed people were using the gift shop too many times. Very important to do that. It makes a little bit more money as well. At this point, I decided to follow in the footsteps of what I did over here and make coaster stations for this particular ride as well. Again, a little bit more of an open concept, but it's got windows on the side. I really like how these turned out as well. And on the back, we can see it's much more open. And I decided to keep with this particular roof trim and move it all the way down to the ground because I just like how that looks. In this back area as well, as you're walking back towards the gift shop coming off of the child coaster, I needed to give this a little bit more of a hidden vibe to it because coming off the coaster and looking out at everything, it can feel like you're in a bit of a fishbowl in a sense. You don't have any real privacy or feel like somebody's watching you maybe. And so I added this wall of trees here, and I might still add more thick dense foliage back in here, so you can't see much of what else is going on from specifically this perspective. It'll also help these coasters to feel more adventurous, and I think that's a good thing. I made a cute little sign for a no entry that's designed specifically for staff to get back here on the staff path. And I believe I did this somewhere else as well. It's over here. I copy pasted another staff building and added a no entry sign over it. This reminds me so much of the signs that I would see in Roller Coaster Tycoon, and honestly, it's super nostalgic in a sense. It doesn't cycle around like that game would, but it does hit that vibe just right. And of course, we have the main attraction here. This is the chair swing that I decided to build a little mound for, plopped it down right on top, scaled down the entrance queue, and of course the ride exit. The ride exit being more of a slant so that if guests were in wheelchairs or needed access to the ride through those means, they could come up the long way. And besides that, I really like some of the night lighting that I did here as well, which I'll show you off here. One of my subscribers suggested that I add in some lights in the trees. It would have taken a long time, but I did get a start on that with some of the willows and some of the trees down here as well. They give off a really interesting looking effect, so I may continue going on with that in the future. Additionally, these wall lights are really sleek for this particular type of theme, and if you tone down the light and turn it into a more orange or brownish color, I think it's just perfect, especially with some of the railings that I have here being wooden. It really captures that rustic look. Although I can't place the rustic benches because they're part of the Western theme, I'm still able to capture that modern American-like look for this whole park. And so that's this section mostly done. I'm thinking for up here, I might add some more flat rides, but we'll see what I end up adding at the very end. I didn't get to show this off yet, but I copied some of the assets over from the other station, and I kind of gave a little bit of variance to this building. It needs a little bit more help, I think, but in its current state, it functions well. I also gave some trims underneath so that the lights would have something to attach to in this enclosed facility. And everything glows a very comfortable blue coming out into the exit. And same with all of these street lamps that I added alongside as well. And as of this update, it is the current state of the park. Let's have another panoramic coming around here. It's got 2 coasters and 3 flat rides, with more yet on the way. There's a lot of work yet to be done. Every time I add in a coaster, it takes most of the stream and most of the day. So I need to be very careful with what I'm adding here. Flat rides are a little faster to add, but they take longer to theme, I believe. Whereas something like this, I could easily go in with a scenery brush and make things look natural very quickly. One more thing, I finally started to branch off and add more power off to the side. Now that I'm getting lots of money, it's time for me to upgrade. If you want to see more of this park get completed, you can catch me over on twitch.tv/ireach1028. And that'll be in the description below as a hyperlink if you want to get there faster. Other than that, you'll see 4 more update videos about this park up until day 25, and then perhaps a final wrap-up video showcasing maybe all of the blueprints that I got out of this park, and maybe I'll touch them all up individually as well. But other than that, have a good one. That's an order. Follow Wicked Soldier. Bye, YouTube.